I think being an artist is extremely fulfilling in that you can just constantly look at difficult things, to look at challenging things and find a way to transcend them through your art. As Indigenous people, a lot of us have felt as though we've been misrepresented through in the artistic canon. Works by George Catlin, Paul Kane were particularly influential in terms of shaping the minds of North Americans in terms of what Indigenous people were supposed to look like. And so works of that period have really influenced filmmakers and popular culture and on and on and on as this sort of authoritative interpretation of Indigenous people. And yet even in the time, it was flawed. They really went out of their way to create a time capsule image of Indigenous people. And that has had this enduring impact on society. Part of my work was to dig through that and to find evidence, to find cracks in that narrative. That's been fascinating to me, is to look below that surface and to find these little cracks that are there and expose them. Well, Mischief was really born out of wanting to reverse the gaze. I was looking at artists like George Catlin, Edward Curtis, Paul Kane, and thinking about who they were as individuals, what motivated those individuals to sort of, create the work that they created to promote themselves. So I wanted a character that could sort of match the ego of those artists and promote herself and promote her vision of the world. And Mischief was that character that I created. And I wanted a persona that could represent a very empowered understanding of Indigenous thinking about gender and sexuality, who was sort of gender fluid, who was timeless, living through the colonial period up to the present. I filled in her backstory later, but that was the origin of this character, was to look back at the settler artists and say, we're looking at you. So Wedding at Sodom is part of a series I did called The Rendezvous. And the Rendezvous gatherings were international gatherings of Indigenous people, trappers, traders in the early 19th century, and they happened in the West. I saw those as a very brief kind of golden age of Indigenous and settler interactions that were largely peaceful. And from the accounts I read, these gatherings were described kind of as wild parties. I was thinking about, these settlers and trappers that were far from the mores of their societies back home in the East, and they were out there experiencing freedom, maybe for the first time. And as that painting series evolved, it started to evolve into exploring transgender identity as this new frontier for society that society is having to kind of grapple with. There is a kind of liberation in not putting so much importance on someone's gender. I mean, really, does it really matter? Let's go this way. There she is. So this is the grand Dame herself in her bedroom, where she has entertained many a colonial leader, including John A. Macdonald. And this house was purchased with hush money from John A. Macdonald because she was his country wife and he returned to Picton. A lot of people are, their ancestry is complicated because in different earlier periods, our own relatives were encouraged to diminish their own indigeneity. And so that is one of the sort of the insidious aspects of the colonial project, is how a lot of Indigenous people have internalized that and seek to sort of, have sought to, diminish, their own Indigenous identities. I think every Indigenous person feels very frustrated that there's so much knowledge in our worldviews and in our cultural understandings and our ways of seeing the world and being in kinship with nature, being in kinship with other living beings, that is misunderstood and has been underestimated by the settlers. A lot of that knowledge and understanding has been overlooked, has been lost. So it's very frustrating. I mean, I created Mischief to create that empowered understanding of gender, that Indigenous people had a place for that in our societies, and that's something I'm very proud of.